September 15th, 1944, 7:30 p.m., Camp McCain, Mississippi. Oberst Heinrich Müller stared at the white china plate in complete disbelief. A perfectly cooked prime rib, still steaming, sat next to mashed potatoes with real butter and green beans that looked fresher than anything he'd seen in 2 years of war. The American guard smiled and said, "Apple pie for dessert, Colonel, made fresh this morning." Here's the twist everyone gets wrong about American POW camps. They weren't just following Geneva Convention rules, they were exceeding them by standards that would make luxury hotels jealous. Stay for the documented reactions that prove German officers thought they were hallucinating. What Müller didn't know was that this dinner cost more than a German soldier's monthly rations. The mathematics of American abundance were already written in production numbers that defied European comprehension. 4.2 billion pounds of beef produced in 1944 alone, enough to feed every person in Germany for 6 months. The culture shock was about to rewrite everything these officers thought they knew about their enemy. The Camp McCain facility represented something unprecedented in military history, a prisoner of war camp that operated like a country club with barbed wire. While German POWs back home survived on ersatz coffee and black bread, Americans had created something that violated every assumption about wartime scarcity. Here's what's insane about this. These weren't isolated incidents of American generosity. This was systematic, nationwide policy affecting 425,000 German prisoners across 700 camps. Among the 2,400 Wehrmacht officers processed that autumn were men who had become post-war industrial leaders, diplomats, and historians. But on September 15th, 1944, they were simply hungry soldiers trying to process an impossible reality. Müller himself had commanded the 116th Panzer Division Supply Corps. He knew exactly how much this meal should cost, and by German standards, it was impossible. This story reveals how American industrial abundance defeated German military precision, and how the Wehrmacht's confidence in their enemy's limitations turned to speechless amazement when they discovered what American hospitality could really do. But wait till you see what happened when they found out about the ice cream. The dining hall at Camp McCain fell dead silent. Not the usual murmur of conversation between guards and prisoners, not the clatter of metal trays. Absolute, stunned silence. 43 German officers sat frozen, staring at meals that their military experience said couldn't exist. This wasn't just culture shock. This was mathematics breaking down. Hauptmann Fritz Kramer, former quartermaster of the Afrika Korps, later wrote in his secret diary, "I have calculated and recalculated. This single meal contains more protein than our entire division received in the last month before Tunis fell. Either the Americans are insane, or we have fundamentally misunderstood this war." The technical impossibility hit them in waves. Real coffee, not the chicory substitute they'd been drinking since 1942. White bread made from actual wheat, not the sawdust mixture German civilians now called bread. Fresh milk, real butter, vegetables that weren't pickled or preserved. Captain Robert Mitchell, the American camp commander, watched their faces with fascination. Some of them just sat there for 20 minutes, he recorded in his official report. They kept looking around like they were waiting for someone to tell them it was a joke. But here's where it gets absolutely crazy. This wasn't even the good stuff. Camp McCain was rated as a standard facility in the American POW system. The luxury camps, and yes, there were luxury camps, served lobster on Sundays. Lobster. To prisoners of war. While German civilians were eating tulip bulbs in Hamburg, Müller picked up his fork with the careful precision of a man defusing a bomb. The prime rib was perfectly medium rare, seasoned with herbs that hadn't existed in German kitchens since the British naval blockade began. The potato was fluffy, creamy, loaded with real dairy products. He took one bite, then another, then looked up at his fellow officers with an expression that the American guards would remember for decades. "Mein Gott," whispered Major Klaus Weber, former supply officer for Army Group Center. "They're not rationing anything." The realization hit the room like a physical force. These Americans weren't just feeding their prisoners well despite wartime shortages. They were feeding them well because there were no shortages. But this was just the beginning of their education in American abundance. Heinrich Müller had built his entire career on understanding supply chains. 32 years old, graduate of the German Staff College, veteran of campaigns in Poland, France, and Russia. His specialty was logistics, the art of moving food, fuel, and ammunition across thousands of miles of hostile territory. He knew exactly how much everything cost, how long it took to transport, how much a nation could afford to spend on warfare. His personal file, now in the National Archives, reveals a man obsessed with efficiency. Before the war, he'd managed his family's food distribution business in Bavaria, turning it into one of Germany's most profitable agricultural operations. His wife Maria wrote to him regularly about rationing cards, about standing in line for hours to buy a single egg, about their 2 young children asking why there was no sugar for Christmas cookies. Müller's last letter from home, dated 3 weeks before his capture in France, painted a devastating picture. The children found a chocolate wrapper in the street today and brought it to me like treasure. Heinrich, they have forgotten what chocolate tastes like. Klaus asks me why the American bombers drop fire instead of food. I don't know how to answer him. What Möller believed about American capabilities was shaped by German propaganda and European experience. Every nation in Europe was starving. Britain survived on American Lend-Lease shipments and strict rationing. Russia had lost 20 million people, many to famine. France was eating rats in occupied Paris. This was simply how wars worked. Everybody suffered, everybody sacrificed, everybody made do with less. The German High Command had calculated American industrial capacity based on European models. Yes, America was large and productive, but they were fighting a 2-front war across 2 oceans. Surely they were stretching their resources thin. Surely their home front was suffering. Surely their prisoners of war would receive minimal rations, basic shelter, simple survival. Möller had interrogated American prisoners near Normandy just months earlier. They complained about sea rations, about missing home cooking, about army food being bland and repetitive. What he didn't realize was that bland army food in America was still better than civilian rations in Germany. The cultural gap was so enormous that communication became impossible. They were describing 2 different universes of abundance and scarcity. The kitchen at Camp McCain was an industrial miracle disguised as routine infrastructure. 6 commercial-grade refrigeration units, each larger than most German field hospitals. Steam tables that could serve 3,000 meals simultaneously. A bakery that produced 2,400 loaves of fresh bread daily, using more white flour in a week than most German cities saw in a month. This wasn't just engineering. This was industrial warfare made delicious. Staff Sergeant Tony Morelli from Chicago ran the kitchen operations with the casual efficiency of a man who'd never known scarcity. His daily requisition orders, preserved in military archives, read like fantasy to European minds. 200 pounds of fresh beef, 800 pounds of potatoes, 400 gallons of whole milk, 200 pounds of real butter, 150 pounds of sugar for desserts, every single day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. The German officers kept asking me where we stored all the food, Morelli recalled in a 1987 interview. They couldn't understand that we didn't store it. Fresh trucks came in every morning from suppliers in Jackson, Meridian, even New Orleans. We threw away more food in a week than their armies saw in a month. Here's the detail that broke their understanding completely. Camp McCain was supplied by the exact same system that fed American civilian populations. No special military suppliers, no emergency rationing, no wartime substitutions. The camp commissary ordered from Cisco, the same company that supplied restaurants in Chicago and hotels in New York. The prime rib came from the same Nebraska stockyards that fed American families. The apple pie was made with Michigan apples, Kansas wheat, and Wisconsin butter, ingredients flowing through supply chains that operated as if there was no war at all. The German officers discovered this gradually, through conversations with guards who casually mentioned shopping at grocery stores, eating at restaurants, buying ice cream for their children. American soldiers talked about food rationing as a minor inconvenience, limited sugar for coffee, occasional shortages of specific items. They had no concept of actual hunger, no experience with systematic starvation. Müller began keeping detailed notes, trying to reverse engineer the logistics. The numbers made no sense. Camp McCain's daily food budget exceeded the monthly food allocation for an entire German regiment. The waste alone, leftover vegetables composted, surplus bread fed to local livestock, represented more nutrition than Warsaw received during the siege. What happened next broke their calculations completely. The numbers were staggering. But the human cost was even more shocking. America was simultaneously feeding 425,000 German prisoners of war better than German civilians ate in peacetime, while maintaining the highest standard of living in human history for 140 million American citizens. Let that sink in for a moment. Daily POW rations across all American camps, 4,200 calories per prisoner. German civilian rations in 1944, 1,500 calories per day, mostly ersatz substitutes. American civilian consumption in 1944, 3,400 calories per day of real food, plus unlimited access to restaurants, snacks, and luxury items. The mathematical impossibility was staring them in the face. Production comparisons that left German officers speechless. America produced 4.2 billion pounds of beef in 1944. Germany's total meat production, including horse, pork, and poultry, 2.1 billion pounds for the entire year. America was feeding its prisoners' enemy soldiers better than Germany was feeding its own population. But wait, it gets worse for German assumptions. Sugar consumption told the whole story. American POW camps used 847,000 pounds of sugar monthly for desserts, coffee, and baking. The entire German civilian population received 23 million pounds of sugar for the entire year of 1944. America was giving prisoners more sugar in treats than most European countries produced for essential rationing. Hauptmann Werner Schmidt, captured at Anzio, discovered the local town of McCain had 3 ice cream parlours serving the civilian population. Ice cream, in wartime. Made with real dairy products, real sugar, served to children as casual entertainment. He wrote to his wife, "Anna, you must believe me, though it sounds like madness. Yesterday I watched American children throw away ice cream because they didn't like the flavour. Threw it away. Food that would feed our Klaus for 2 days, discarded because of preference." The human anecdote that shattered their worldview. Private Jimmy Patterson from Iowa mentioned that his family's dairy farm was producing so much milk they had to pour excess quantities into irrigation ditches because storage capacity was exceeded. Excess milk. Wasted. While German children developed rickets from calcium deficiency, the cascade realization hit Möller like artillery fire. America wasn't even trying hard. This abundance was routine, casual, the baseline of American existence. They were fighting the most expensive war in human history, while simultaneously improving civilian living standards and treating enemy prisoners like honoured guests. Here's what they never saw coming. Back home in Germany, Möller's wife Maria was grinding acorns into flour, not as a rustic hobby or survival exercise, as the primary ingredient for their family's daily bread. Her letters, intercepted and filed by camp intelligence officers, provided a stark counterpoint to his American dining experiences. "Heinrich, we have learned to make coffee from roasted barley. The children think it tastes wonderful because they cannot remember real coffee. Klaus found a piece of real chocolate in a bombed-out shop and saved it for 3 weeks, taking tiny nibbles to make it last." The German war economy had been stretched beyond all rational limits since 1943. Ersatz everything. Substitute coffee made from chicory and roasted grain, substitute chocolate made from saccharin and chalk dust, substitute meat made from soybeans and food colouring. Clothing was made from wood pulp fibre. Soap was manufactured from industrial waste products. Fuel was synthesized from coal at enormous expense in both resources and human labour. What the German officers couldn't comprehend was American waste. Camp McCain's garbage disposal was a logistical operation larger than most German supply lines. Daily food waste, not spoiled or contaminated, just surplus, exceeded 800 pounds. Fresh vegetables discarded because prisoners preferred different varieties. Bread thrown away because it was 1 day old. Milk poured down drains because storage tanks were full. Major Klaus Weber began documenting everything in secret notebooks, trying to understand the economics. American guards casually mentioned grocery stores with entire aisles dedicated to breakfast cereals, dozens of different brands competing for consumer preference, restaurants that served portions larger than German holiday feasts, families who owned multiple automobiles, used gasoline for recreational driving, took vacation trips during wartime. The emotional peak came when Weber learned about American agricultural production. Iowa alone produced more corn than the entire German Reich. Kansas wheat production exceeded the combined agricultural output of France, Italy, and Germany. Nebraska cattle ranches were larger than entire German states. The scale was beyond European comprehension. a continental empire of abundance that had never known scarcity, never experienced siege, never learned the economics of desperation. The psychological breaking point approached rapidly. These officers had built their entire understanding of warfare on resource limitation, strategic prioritization, calculated risk based on finite supplies. America had infinite supplies. The rules of the game had changed completely, and Germany was still playing by European rules while America was operating in a different universe entirely. October 3rd, 1944. Müller's diary entry, written in microscopic German script on paper torn from American magazines. I can no longer maintain the illusion that we understood our enemy. Today they served us chocolate cake with real cocoa, real sugar, real buttercream frosting. The American guards mentioned this was normal Tuesday dessert, not a special occasion. I calculated. This single slice contains more sugar than Maria's monthly ration card allows our entire family. I have been a fool. We have all been fools. We invaded Russia believing we were fighting for Lebensraum, for living space, for agricultural resources to feed our people. Meanwhile, across the ocean, a nation with unlimited Lebensraum was casually feeding enemy prisoners luxuries we haven't seen since peacetime. How do you defeat an enemy who considers abundance boring? The moment of complete realization came through conversation with Sergeant Mike O'Sullivan from Chicago. O'Sullivan mentioned that his family was saving money during the war because rationing made it impossible to buy everything they wanted, not because food was unavailable, but because government restrictions limited sugar purchases to £5 per family per month, gasoline to 4 gallons per week for non-essential driving, and new automobiles were temporarily unavailable because factories were making tanks instead. Muller stared at him in complete incomprehension. Your family is saving money because you can only buy £5 of sugar monthly? O'Sullivan nodded cheerfully. Yeah, it's annoying. Before the war we probably went through £8 or £10 a month. Baking, coffee, the kids' candy. But hey, we're doing our part for the war effort. The human drama of this moment was captured in Muller's increasingly desperate letters to Maria, which camp censors read with growing sympathy. My beloved wife, I must tell you something that will sound like madness. Our captors consider their wartime sacrifices to be minor inconveniences. They complain about having to wait in line for 50 minutes to buy meat. They grumble about gasoline rationing that still allows more fuel consumption than our entire Wehrmacht receives. They are annoyed that new automobiles are temporarily unavailable for civilian purchase. Maria, they are fighting us with their surplus capacity, their leftovers. Their industrial waste products are higher quality than our strategic military supplies. We have been fighting a war against American abundance with German scarcity. It was never a fair contest. The climax: complete psychological transformation. Miller stopped trying to understand American logistics and started trying to understand American psychology. How do you motivate a population that has everything? How do you maintain military discipline among soldiers who could quit and live better as civilians? The answer terrified him. Americans were fighting because they chose to, not because they had to. The news spread through the camp like psychological contagion. Quick succession of reality checks that shattered German assumptions one by one. Oberst Friedrich von Seckendorf, former logistics commander for Army Group South, discovered that American military vehicles used higher-grade fuel than the Luftwaffe, reserved for emergency fighter missions, routine fuel, for trucks carrying supplies to prisoner camps. Major Ernst Hoffmann learned that American soldiers received clothing allowances larger than his annual Wehrmacht salary. New uniforms issued regularly, not patched and repatched until threads disintegrated. Hauptmann Gustav Brenner found out that Camp McCain's medical facility had more pharmaceutical supplies than most German field hospitals serving active combat units. Penicillin, the miracle drug German soldiers died for lack of, was used routinely for minor infections among prisoners. The domino effect accelerated as different officers shared intelligence. Each conversation revealed new impossibilities. American home front production statistics that exceeded German wartime output. Civilian consumption patterns that surpassed European peacetime luxury. Military logistics that treated 1,000-mile supply lines as routine administrative challenges. Captain Heinrich Gross, formerly responsible for ammunition supply on the Eastern Front, had a breakdown when he learned that American ammunition production exceeded German output by margins that made mathematical comparison meaningless. "They are firing more artillery shells for training exercises than we produce for actual combat," he wrote. "This is not warfare. This is industrial demonstration." Multiple perspectives converged on the same terrifying conclusion. Germany had been fighting the wrong war entirely. European-style warfare based on careful resource management, strategic prioritization, calculated risks. America was fighting unlimited warfare, throwing unlimited resources at every problem until problems ceased to exist. Weber's analysis, shared secretly among the officers: "We have been playing chess while they have been playing a completely different game with unlimited pieces, unlimited moves, unlimited time. Our strategic thinking assumed mutual scarcity. Their strategic thinking assumes abundance so vast that scarcity becomes impossible." The cascade climax came when they discovered recreation facilities. Camp McCain had a fully equipped gymnasium, a library with thousands of books, organized sports leagues, educational classes taught by American university professors. German prisoners were receiving better education and recreation than German civilians in peacetime. The psychological momentum became unstoppable. These weren't just prisoners of war, they were witnesses to American civilization at its peak performance. Everything they had been told about American weakness, American moral corruption, American industrial limitations was not merely wrong, but backwards. America was stronger, more organized, more efficient, and more humane than German propaganda had deemed possible. The German High Command never received Möller's reports. His letters home were censored, his official communications intercepted, his intelligence observations filed away in American archives. But had they reached Berlin, they would have triggered a fundamental reassessment of German strategic assumptions. The tactical adaptations his analysis suggested were already futile before they could be implemented. Müller's strategic recommendations found in his secret notebooks after the war revealed the scope of German miscalculation. "We must immediately cease all offensive operations and concentrate entirely on defensive positions designed to inflict maximum casualties on American forces. However, this strategy assumes Americans will be deterred by losses. Given their industrial capacity to replace equipment and their agricultural capacity to feed unlimited armies, casualty sensitivity may not apply." Alternative strategy: attempt to prolong the war until American civilian populations demand peace due to economic hardship. Analysis suggests this is impossible. American wartime economy has increased civilian living standards, while simultaneously supporting military operations on 6 continents. Economic hardship is not forthcoming. The technical analysis became increasingly desperate as Möller grasped the mathematical reality. American aircraft production in 1944, 96,818 planes. German production, 39,807 planes, mostly using ersatz materials and slave labor. American pilot training programs graduated more qualified aviators monthly than Germany could train in 6 months. American fuel production exceeded German consumption by ratios that made air warfare unsustainable. Leadership's theoretical response would have been strategic innovation, new tactics, secret weapons, technological breakthroughs that could offset material disadvantages. Müller's analysis demolished these hopes systematically. American research and development budgets exceeded total German military expenditure. American universities were producing more scientists and engineers annually than Germany had available for all military research combined. The Manhattan Project, though unknown to German prisoners, represented everything Möller was discovering about American capabilities. Unlimited funding, unlimited resources, unlimited scientific talent, unlimited industrial capacity, unlimited political support. Problems solved by throwing more resources at them until solutions became inevitable. Weber's supplementary analysis focused on timeline implications. Even if German science produces miracle weapons, American industrial capacity will reverse engineer and mass-produce superior versions within months. They have more engineers in Detroit automobile factories than we have in our entire research establishment. Our technological advantages, if they exist, will be temporary by definition. The final strategic conclusion was surrender or extinction. Not eventual surrender after, honourable resistance, immediate surrender before Germany was reduced to archaeological remnants. But this analysis never reached the people who needed to hear it most. Christmas Eve, 1944. Camp McCain decorated for the holidays with lights, Christmas trees, and a feast that would have fed a German battalion for a week. Muller sat in the dining hall, looking at a slice of genuine apple pie topped with real vanilla ice cream, and felt something inside him break completely. Not his spirit, his illusions. Complete acceptance of American superiority arrived not through military defeat, but through kindness so systematic it became overwhelming. The American Guards had organised Christmas presents for German prisoners, small gifts purchased with their own money, wrapped carefully, distributed with genuine good cheer. Enemy soldiers giving gifts to captured enemies during the largest war in human history. Müller's final diary entry from 1944. Today I understand why we lost this war before it began. We assumed our enemies were like us, limited by resources, motivated by necessity, driven by scarcity to fight for survival. Americans are fighting for principles we cannot comprehend because we have never experienced their abundance. They can afford to be generous to enemies because generosity costs them nothing. They can afford to be humane because humanity is cheaper than cruelty. I think of Maria grinding acorns while these guards give us ice cream made from surplus dairy production. I think of my children wearing shoes with cardboard soles while American prisoners receive new boots monthly. We have been fighting for Lebensraum while they have been fighting to preserve a civilization that has already achieved everything we dreamed of conquering. The character transformation was complete, from confidence born of military professionalism to resignation born of mathematical reality. Müller stopped calculating logistics and started learning English. He requested books about American history, American government, American economics. The enemy he had fought was not the enemy he had imagined. Major Weber's Christmas letter to his wife captured the emotional resolution. Greta, when this war ends, we must rebuild Germany completely. Not just the cities destroyed by bombing, but our understanding of what civilization can become. I have seen the future, and it includes enough food for everyone, enough wealth for education, enough security for kindness. The Americans are not our conquerors, they are our teachers. Last desperate attempts at resistance became impossible when resistance had no rational foundation. How do you fight enemies who treat you better than your own government treats its citizens? How do you maintain hatred for people who demonstrate daily that their civilization is superior in every measurable way? The final truth was simple. Germany had chosen the wrong side of history by choosing the wrong understanding of what history was becoming. May 8th, 1945. V-Day. Muller learned about German surrender while eating breakfast in Camp McCain. Fresh eggs, bacon, orange juice, and coffee with real sugar. The war that had consumed Europe for 6 years ended for him not with artillery fire or dramatic proclamations, but with an American guard named Corporal Danny Rodriguez saying, "Well, Colonel, I guess you'll be going home soon." Post-war testimonies revealed the lasting impact of American POW hospitality on German strategic thinking. Muller became a prominent voice in post-war German-American relations, serving as cultural liaison for the Marshall Plan. His memoirs, published in 1967, included detailed documentation of American abundance witnessed during captivity. We learned more about American capabilities from their prison camps than our intelligence services discovered in 4 years of warfare. The statistical summary of the gap tells the complete story. Total cost of feeding German POWs in American camps exceeded the entire German military food budget for 1944. American prisoners ate better than German officers. American prisoners received better medical care than German civilians. American prisoners had access to better education than most German universities could provide during wartime. Weber's post-war analysis presented to German Reconstruction authorities. American victory was inevitable, not because of superior weapons or tactics, but because of superior civilization. They defeated us with their surplus capacity while maintaining higher living standards than we achieved during our best peacetime years. This was not military conquest. This was cultural demonstration. The universal truth about industrial warfare became clear through this experience. Modern war is won by productive capacity, not military skill. The side that can afford to be generous to enemies has already achieved victory. The side that can maintain abundance during total war possesses resources that make military resistance pointless. Modern relevance connects directly to today's global economic competition. China's Belt and Road Initiative follows the American POW camp model, demonstrating abundance through infrastructure gifts that showcase superior industrial capacity. Economic warfare has replaced military warfare because the Americans proved that overwhelming, productive capacity makes traditional military victory obsolete. Müller's final assessment, written in 1970, "We thought we were fighting for Germany's future. In reality, we were fighting against the future itself. American prisoner camps in 1944 had achieved the standard of living that Germany reached only in the 1970s. They weren't our enemies. They were 30 years ahead of us in human development. The question was never whether Germany could defeat America. The question was whether Germany could learn from America quickly enough to survive. The prime rib and apple pie weren't just food. They were proof that abundance defeats scarcity, that generosity demonstrates strength, and that treating enemies well is the ultimate expression of confidence in victory."